So today we're going to talk a little bit about continuity, which should be a concept that's familiar to you from 1995 because, of course, continuity really relates to editing, and the whole idea is to be sure that your editing is continuous, right? Continuity, the root word being continuous. And you want to make your edits in such a way that they are continuous so that the action flows smoothly and seamlessly. And that means avoiding things like jump cuts. And those are probably the main number one error when it comes to continuity, to ways to break continuity. Jump cuts, they always get in the way, and basically what they are is exactly what they say they are. Jump cuts are nothing more than the action jumping on the screen. Now, whether that be a person or whether that be an object, whatever it might be, it jumps on the screen. It moves from one position to another, okay? And jump cuts, again, as we said, are really the number one way to break continuity. So it's important to avoid jump cuts. And in order to avoid jump cuts, you have to have what we call cut-ins or cutaways. Those are the best ways to prevent a jump cut, or more importantly, to preserve your continuity so you do not have a jump cut. And we're going to talk about all of those. I'm going to show you some examples here. But first, let me get started, I guess, just by talking about continuity in general. And again, it's that break in continuous action. It's when something happens that is not continuous. It's not natural. And I'm going to show you a clip here. And I want you to watch this. It's actually from the sitcom Seinfeld. Watch it and see when you see a break in continuity, when you see something that doesn't look continuous, okay? When there's a break in the flow of the action or the seamlessness of the action, okay? See if you can identify it here.
What is going on? Who's Andre?
Kramer's Andre. He's fooling around with these 976 numbers. Hey, I told you, I don't want you doing that on my phone.
Jerry, I'm telling you, this phone sex thing is hilarious. Like this Erica woman? Here, look. You gotta call her. The voice she uses.
Hey, you know, it's weird because that voice sounded a little familiar to me.
Okay, so what you should have seen was obviously this newspaper appearing in Kramer's hands. And if you watched it closely, you noticed that when Kramer was talking, he was using his hands, but there was nothing in his hands. He was just motioning. It was just gestures as he was talking. And then all of a sudden, poof, a newspaper appears out of nowhere. And that was a break in continuity because the viewer had no idea where that newspaper came from. All right, it was not a logical flow in terms of the action. So that was a very blatant break in continuity. But as we said, really the number one cause for breaks in continuity is jump cuts. And the number one reason you have jump cuts is because you end up with people in different body positions. And again, this should sound familiar to you, I'm pretty sure, from 1995. But if you have people as your subject and you show them in two different positions in shots that are back to back, you have a jump cut because, again, they're moving on the screen, they're jumping on the screen, and they are not in the same position. And people's body positions are the number one ways to have a jump cut occur. So let me go back to Seinfeld here for just a moment and let me show you another clip and see if you can pick up where the jump cut or the break in continuity occurs in this clip.
Well, I think you'll find out soon enough. Aren't you going to get there?
No.
Well, what if it's an emergency?
Oh, there's no emergencies.
Jerry, come on, it's an emergency!
So again, where it was, and hopefully you saw it, was when Jerry was moving in, okay? There was a shot of him starting to move forward as he got closer to Terry Hatcher. It was sort of like the moment where he was moving in for the kiss, and all of a sudden there's this knock on the door, and he turns to see what it is, and the next shot is a break in continuity, because when we see that shot where he turns, all right, he's in a different position. His body is in a different position, and so is hers. If you look at it closely, you'll see that Terry Hatcher's arms and Seinfeld's arms and legs are both in a different position from one shot to the next. From that first shot where he's moving in for that kiss to that second shot where he's looking back to see what the knock at the door is all about. So because those two shots were edited back to back and because both actors' bodies were in different positions, you have a jump cut. So those have to be avoided. And those are things that you have to be cognizant of. Now, you can have a jump cut, but you don't want it to be seen, all right? Now, maybe, just perhaps, your audio will flow continuously from one shot to another, as it did in those shots that you just saw with Seinfeld. All right, so the audio sounds fine. If you were to close your eyes and listen to what was being said, it would sound perfect. But there's still that visual jump cut. So you can keep the audio. You can keep the audio flowing very smoothly and very continuously. But if you have to have a break in the visual, then what you need is a way to cover that up. You need a B-roll shot. You need to put some video over that. And the way to do that is with a thing called a cutaway. And a cutaway is nothing more than cutting away from the action, the main source of action, to something related to that action. It's a great way to help tell the story, because what it does is it shows the viewer a different concept of the environment. It shows the viewer something else that is going on. The example I like to use, because it's so easy to think of, because we've all seen it, is a football game. Think of a football game. Now, imagine a touchdown being scored, all right? The receiver makes the catch in the end zone, all right? Touchdown, Falcons. What's the next shot that you're going to see, inevitably? Well, it's going to be a crowd shot, okay? It's going to be somebody in the crowd going nuts. You know, maybe it's one of those guys without a shirt who's out there in sub-zero weather. But whatever it is, it's a shot of the crowd. So it goes from the action on the field of the catch of the touchdown to the crowd. We cut away to something related to the action that is not part of the action. And then we can cut back to that main action. So stay with me, because it's really easy to visualize, because you've seen it thousands of times. Catch is made in the end zone, right? There's your main action. You need a cutaway. You cut to the crowd, somebody going nuts in the stands. Now you can cut back to the end zone, and this time we can see the receiver and maybe the quarterback and a couple of other players all celebrating, doing a high five or a chest bump or whatever it might be in the end zone. And that works perfectly for us, because in our minds, even though when that catch is made, we do not see the quarterback and the other players on the team in the end zone, we only see the receiver. But in our minds, it makes sense, because while we're looking at the crowd, while we're cutting away to the shot of the crowd celebrating, then when we cut back, we see the quarterback and the other players in the end zone, because our mind tells us that they came down the field and joined that receiver while we were looking at the crowd. So it's that concept of a cutaway. And let me show you an example here. This is not a football game, but nonetheless, I think it'll work. This is actually a band, a marching band going by. And what you're going to see is, as the band progresses, it's going to cut away. And it's going to cut away to two people who are actually watching and listening to the band. And then it will cut back to the band. So your main source of action is the band marching by. The cutaway is of the people watching. And then we go back to the main action as the band continues to march down the street. Take a look. So those are some of the shots that you want to actually think about. And I say you want to think about because you can only edit what you shoot. Please remember that. You can only edit what you shoot. So if you need a cutaway and you have not shot that cutaway, okay, you're going to be in trouble when it comes to editing. So think about it. It's one of the real important aspects of shooting in the field. Think like an editor. Please think like an editor and think about all the shots that you're going to need to be able to edit this piece together. And make sure you have all of those required shots, including your cutaways. Now, another example is what they call a cut-in. So instead of cutting away from the action, you can preserve continuity by using a cut-in or cutting into that action. And let me again give you a real simple example here. Let's imagine that there's a parade, okay, that we're watching a parade and the floats are going by and there's Santa. There's Santa on the float at the end of the parade. As he goes by, he waves to the crowd, right? Okay, so normally when you see a parade, when you're watching a parade being televised on television, normally what you see is a wide shot so that obviously the viewer gets a feel for all of the floats or, you know, everything that's happening in the parade, whether it's floats or bands or whatever it is, cars, okay? All those things that make up a parade, you see those on a wide shot. Well, that's great. Now, here you are. You've got your wide shot. Here comes Santa on his float, okay? Now we're going to cut in. We're going to cut in. And we're going to get a close-up shot of Santa waving, all right? And then we can come back out to a wide shot. So really what we've got, if you think about it, is what we've been talking about all semester. We've got a wide shot, a close-up shot, and back to a wide shot. So we're changing that focal length again to create that cut in. And by doing that, we're preserving the continuity. It's just another way to do it. So you have your cut away and you have your cut in, and they both work very effectively in preserving continuity. So please keep those in mind because, again, they have to be shot in order for those to be edited. That's real important. Again, you cannot edit what you don't shoot. So it's important to do that. So the other thing then that I wanted just to bring to your attention real quickly is a thing called foreshadowing. It's just a concept in editing, and it's really very easy to do. And I'll tell you the purpose of it. First of all, let me define it for you. Foreshadowing, all right? And we're going to concentrate here on audio foreshadowing that I'm going to demonstrate in just a minute. And what an audio foreshadow is nothing more than hearing a voice before you see who that voice belongs to, okay? So it's a foreshadow. In other words, you know, beforehand, the coming of something before something else. Well, in this case, it's the coming of the audio before we see the person who is speaking, okay? Audio foreshadowing. And it's a very simple technique, and I'll show you, as I said, how it's done. But I need you to understand why it's done. And audio foreshadowing is a great technique because in television and video production, if you can change one element at a time, okay, it's going to make a much smoother transition for the viewer. It will be far less abrupt than changing two elements at a time. When I'm talking about elements, I'm talking about the only two that we have, audio and video. All right? So when you're editing and you're working with audio and video, if you change one of those elements, and in this case it will be the audio, if you change one of those before you change the other one, okay, it makes for a much smoother transition. And that's the purpose of an audio foreshadow. So in other words, you're foreshadowing for the viewer the fact that they're about to see somebody, but before they see them, you let them hear that person first so that it doesn't all change at once, so that it's not the audio and the video changing simultaneously, because that can be abrupt. So you sort of ease the viewer into the transition, and you do it with that audio foreshadow of letting the voice be heard before the person's face is seen, all right? And it's very, very easy to do. Here's what I mean. So again, audio foreshadowing now is nothing more than foreshadowing or bringing in the audio before we see the video that it goes with. And again, we're talking about a person's voice. So what we're really saying is audio foreshadowing is hearing the person's voice before we see the person who's speaking. And again, this is a very simple concept. Let me reiterate again that the reason we do this is to change one element between the audio and the video, to change one element at a time to make the transition smoother for the viewer and much less abrupt. So again, it's very simple to do. What I've got here is, first of all, I've got this video, which is just basically a clip of that's really already edited. It's a clip of some B-roll with the natural sound and with a voice track, all right? And basically what you're going to see is, as I play it, let me do that right now. As I play it, what you're going to see is it's sort of an introduction to one particular player. So this was actually taken from a package that was a profile story on a volleyball player at BGSU several seasons ago. But again, as I play this, what you'll hear is that it's basically an introduction to that player. So here it is.
Dunn is easy to spot on the court. One reason is because she plays libero.
So it's talking about this particular player and her position.
But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
And it talks about why she stands out, about what makes her such a good player, all right? So now, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to foreshadow her voice, so that I'm going to bring in her voice before we actually cut to her to see her as she's speaking. And I do have her soundbite. It's right here, okay? So all I'm going to do again is just set it up so that you'll hear her voice under this B-roll before you actually see her face. But let's start with the actual soundbite itself and where I want it to begin. So there's a little bit here in the beginning that I'm going to cut away. I'm just going to play this for you. And again, there's probably a couple of seconds that I'd want to get rid of before we actually begin the soundbite.
The honor itself. I mean,
All right, so that's the question that's being asked.
But I definitely couldn't do it without the rest of my team.
All right, so that's actually where I want to start it. So as we listen to it again,
I'm very honored, but I definitely couldn't do it without the rest.
I definitely couldn't do it. That's going to be my in cue to the soundbite. That's where I want the soundbite to begin, okay? So let's cut away the rest of it. And she actually pauses very nicely. She's going to say and then she's going to pause.
But
right there. And that's going to be the beginning of my soundbite. So I'm going to cut the rest of that away. Cut away the portion in the beginning here that I really don't need and don't want. And after I do that, then my soundbite is going to start with...
I definitely couldn't do it without the rest of my team, if it weren't for especially our...
Okay, so that's where we want it. And now the idea is we want to begin the voice before we see the person speaking. All right, in order to do this, we're going to need 2 video tracks. We're going to need video 1 and video 2. And of course, likewise, that will correlate to audio 1 and audio 2. All right, so you know... but basically, again, when you're working with Adobe Premiere, you know that the top video track is the one that is seen first, the top video track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clip here, which is, again, the B-roll, and I'm going to move it into video 2 because we want it seen before we actually see the player, all right? So now because I did that, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to move the audio as well. All right, and as you can see right now, the audio is in A1 right here, but I'm going to move it down so that the audio will be in A2 and so that it will correspond now. I have my video in V2 and I have my audio in A2. So I want those two working together. Then this is the soundbite. And this I can keep together. It's now currently in video 1, in the video 1 track, with the audio in the audio 1 track. So that can stay just as it is. And then as I move it over, okay, I'm going to be able, obviously, to mix some of that sound. All right, so again, now the point is, I want that soundbite to start right at the end of the voice track that we have here in the beginning on this clip. So let's just go ahead and play this clip again.
Wears a different colored jersey for substitutions. But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
All right, also stands out because of her play. That's where she's going to start to speak. So let me cue that back up.
Jersey for substitutions. But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
There it is, okay? So right where my cursor line is where I want my audio to begin. That's where I want the audio to start to foreshadow who's going to be speaking. All right, so I'm going to just simply slide over this clip of the soundbite right to where my cursor line is, or my scrub line, I should say, right to where the scrub line is. And now I've got it. And you can see, hopefully, and again, I know the view is not as good as it would be in the classroom, but hopefully you can see where these overlap. So in other words, the video of the B-roll of the game action is just slightly overlapped with the beginning of the soundbite. And that is what is going to create our audio foreshadow. So if we look at it right now and play it, what we should hear is the voice track, which is my voice, okay, that should stop. And when that stops, then we should hear the voice of the person speaking, the player, And then after a few seconds of hearing her, we should see her. But we should hear the player's voice initially under the B-roll of the game action. And I'm sure that's exactly what we're going to see. So here we go.
For substitutions. But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
Without the rest of my team, if it weren't for especially our blocker, block has been doing amazing.
Okay, that was it. Not too smooth because Adobe decided it was going to be a little jittery there. But let's see if we can get it to actually play smoothly.
But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
I definitely couldn't do it without the rest of my team. If it weren't for especially our
So there it
blocker,
is.
block has been doing amazing, and they.
So again, the idea is that we just simply bring in the person's voice under. We bring in the person's voice under some B-roll, let that voice get established for just a few seconds, anywhere from, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 seconds, just enough to indicate to the viewer that, hey, somebody is talking, we're about to see that person, and then we cut to them. So let me play it one more time real quickly here. Hopefully it won't flutter again, and you'll get the idea.
But Dunn also stands out because of her play.
I definitely couldn't do it without the rest of my team. If it weren't for especially our blocker, block.
That's it. So it's as easy as using the 2 video and audio channels. And again, you just simply have to keep in mind that the top track is always seen first. So that's going to be your video. That's going to be, again, in this case, your B-roll. And then under that, in V1, after the B-roll stops, Adobe will cut to what's in V1, what's in the video 1 track, and that will be the soundbite. So it works very well. We just need to have the B-roll and the soundbite overlap just a little bit, and that is what creates our audio foreshadow. Okay? And this is a technique that we're actually going to be asking you to do as we move forward with some of the editing for both the creative storytelling project and for the news package project that we're going to do. So we've got 2 projects left, and in the editing of those, we want you to utilize this technique, this audio foreshadow. And we'll also eventually talk about the video foreshadow. That's, in some ways, it's easier, but in other ways, it's a little bit more complicated. And I say that because there's 2 ways to video foreshadow. And we'll show you both of those as we move along. But for right now, we just want to show you the audio foreshadow because it's the easier of the 2. And again, it is very effective in terms of establishing for the viewer the fact that a transition is about to occur by hearing the voice first and then seeing the person.